What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. Today we're doing something a little bit different. We're going to be doing a mock draft simulator of the 2025 NBA draft. So we're using Fanspo this time around. They have an NBA mock draft simulator on their website, which is amazing. And the draft picks are based on, or the draft order is based on who the worst teams are. So no lottery, no nothing, no teams jumping up. So the Wizards will have the first pick, then the Pelicans, etc., etc. This also does have the picks conveying to those teams based on the draft or based on the standings. So there could be, or there probably will be, a ton of shifting around when the actual draft comes. So keep that in mind. A lot of these prospects outside of the top two are going to be fit based depending on the team that is up. So if you see a team like the Hornets or something like that, I'll give some, explanation on why I think that player fits that team better than a different player who might be overall ranked higher. Because remember, basketball is a, game of fit, who can play with each other, who cannot play with each other. All right, we're going to start off. First team, we have the Washington Wizards. Doesn't matter if it's the Wizards, doesn't matter if it's the Pelicans, doesn't matter if it's the Hornets, doesn't matter if it's the Thunder. The player you take number one in this class is Cooper Flag. Unanimous. He is the best player in this draft class. He's the best player in college basketball as an 18-year-old. He has the most upside in this draft class, in my opinion. He is putting up 20 points. He plays fantastic defense. His big question mark, which was his shot, has been coming around very, very well, especially in the last 10 games. He had a game against Clemson where he did struggle, but he proved that when it comes to big shots or clutch time moments, he can do it. He could hit the shots. And it's great to see that his three-point shot is actually falling now, because his biggest worry was his three-point shooting and his shot creation. But he's been able to get off his shots. He's leading the number 2 team in the country as an 18-year-old, which is I can't overstate enough how impressive that is. He's a great on-ball defender, great help defender. He can create his own shot as well. Obviously his three-point shooting has to get better. I'm not sure if the 35% is going to be consistent, but you hope that he, becomes consistent enough where he can knock that shot down with confidence. The next team we have up is the Pelicans. Now, this is where you could potentially see a big shakeup in the draft depending on who's picking where. Cooper Flag is going number 1, unanimous. If a team doesn't take Cooper Flag with the first overall pick, then their front office needs to be fired. Number 2 is where it could maybe get a little bit dicey. But I think Dylan Harper is still the second best player in this draft class. He plays for a Rutgers team which hasn't been, winning too much, but he's been playing great for them. 20 points, 4 assists, 5 rebounds, shooting well from the field. His three-point shot has been inconsistent at times, but, he's still able to shoot the 3-ball pretty effectively. He's 6'6", he's tall, he has that Cade Cunningham build. He has a great handle. He could get to the rim pretty smooth, pretty easily. He does sometimes struggle to finish through traffic, and he does struggle off the catch sometimes if you plan on playing him at the 2. But if the Pelicans are drafting him, then it's, he could fit alongside CJ McCollum or DeJounte Murray, whoever you decide to roll with. He could play off the ball pretty well, although his catch and shoot 3-point shot has been a bit dicey, like I mentioned before. He's still, you expect that to come around eventually, especially because his off-the-dribble shooting is great. He's a great shot creator, and his playmaking is really good, especially for a Rutgers team that doesn't have a ton of talent or a ton of shot makers. 4 assists doesn't tell the whole story. He drives to the rim. He's able to get easy kickouts. He's able to easily set up his teams for some shots. I see him fitting really, really well on the Pelicans roster, especially alongside Zion, if that's your long-term plan, which, it's been a plan for theirs for 6 years now. But I think Dylan Harper, depending on who's picking number 2, goes second overall 9 out of 10 times. The only time I don't see him is if maybe the Hornets were picking there. But even then, I think he's the second best overall player in this draft class by a pretty wide margin. He has a ton of potential, ton of scoring potential, ton of playmaking potential. His defense is a little dicey. He has lapses. Sometimes he doesn't put in as much effort as he should, but he has everything that you'd want in a modern day point guard. He has the height, the shot creation, the ball handling, the playmaking, and he also is pretty athletic. So you don't really have to worry about him not being able to get to the rim at the NBA level. So the next team that we have is the Utah Jazz. Now this is where it could, literally go any direction. But if I'm the Jazz and I take a look at my roster, you're drafting best player available no matter what. You're drafting the best player available. And, they have quite a few guards on the roster. Isaiah Collier has been good. Keontae George has been good, so maybe you want to give them another year. So I don't think they take Kasparas Yakushonis here. I think they take Ace Bailey with the 3rd overall pick. Ace Bailey has been good for Rutgers. 19 points. He's been efficient. 47% from the field, about 35% from 3. 1 assist per game. That's where his really big weakness is. If I'm to be honest. I don't even have to be honest if I'm being real. He has tunnel vision at times. He is a prolific scorer. He's 6'10", can shoot over anybody. Anybody. Point guards, small forwards, power forwards, centers. He could get his shot off anybody, and it's a good shot. Similar to Michael Porter Jr. in some ways. But one of the big things with Ace Bailey is he does have a bit of a handle. He is able to handle the ball and create his own shot. Sometimes he relies too heavily on a contested midi or a step back midi, and he leans into that a little bit too much instead of trying to get to the rim. He has struggled finishing at the rim. He's a pretty skinny. He weighs only 200 pounds at 6'10". For reference, Dylan Harper weighs 215 and he's 6'6". So he does have to get a little bit bigger just so he's able to finish through contact a bit better. His 3-point shot hasn't been the most consistent, but he has been able to shoot it. He's also not a really great free throw shooter, but with his ability in the mid-range and, the inside area, he should be able to increase those numbers pretty dramatically. And when he gets to the NBA, he's a player that has a ton of potential. And the Jazz, they could use a player like that. They don't have a go-to young star on their roster at all. Do you think Keontae George is going to lead you to a championship? I don't think so. You think Isaiah Collier is going to do that? I don't think so. And I think Ace Bailey provides the Jazz a player who they could really try and build around. And if it doesn't work out and he doesn't reach his full potential, I still think you're going to have a mismatch, a walking mismatch on your team. He is pretty solid defensively. He's been a decent shot blocker. He, like Dylan Harper, he doesn't give effort at times, which is something he, definitely needs to get through in his mental. But other than that, offensively, he is pretty good. He does have tunnel vision, like I said. He needs to work on, being able to get his teammates easy buckets, because then that opens his scoring as well. So for the 4th pick, the Charlotte Hornets are selecting. This is something that is really, really interesting, because depending on how the board falls up to this point, the Hornets could go a bunch of directions. But I think the clear favorite, or a lot of a player that everybody is mocking to the Hornets, is VJ Edgecombe. I think a lot of people have fallen in love with VJ Edgecombe, including me, playing for Charlotte. He is exactly what they need. He fits beautifully alongside LaMelo and Brandon Miller at the 2. And for Baylor, he's putting up 15 points, 3 assists, 5 rebounds, shooting it well from the field, shooting it well from 3 as well, which is one of the biggest question marks a lot of scouts and, teams had about VJ Edgecombe. He was not a great shooter in high school. He started off pretty rough, but his last 10 games, he has been fantastic for Baylor. Fantastic. He's arguably been the 2nd best player in college basketball his last 2 games. He's a terrific defender. He's the most athletic player in the draft class. He can get to the rim, finish at a high level. He does everything on the court well, similar to what Derek White does. But I think VJ Edgecombe provides you something different, and is a player who's able to get to the rim pretty easily. And alongside LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller, who are heavy jump shooters, I think that's a perfect player. He could defend really well too. He has potential to be one of the 2nd best defender in this draft class behind Cooper Flagg. He's 6'5". He has good height. I think VJ Edgecombe is a perfect fit for the Hornets. Now, do the Hornets consider taking Trey Johnson here? Maybe, but I don't think Trey Johnson is the player you need. I think VJ Edgecombe fits much better alongside Ball and Miller. And if you plan on really building around those two, then VJ Edgecombe is the pick here pretty confidently, I'm saying. Kasparas Yakushonis, you could consider him, but I think his and LaMelo Ball's talents are overlapping. I think you could take Igor Demin, but once again, I don't think Igor Demin fits well. He's a ball dominant player, and getting a player who could play off the ball, on the ball, like VJ Edgecombe is really, really important, especially for Ball and Miller, who's had a heavy offensive workload this season. So with the 5th pick, we have the Toronto Raptors. I think the easy pick here is Kasparis Yakushonis, especially if it's the Raptors. In terms of tier rankings, right, you have Cooper Flag at the tippity top. You have Dylan Harper, then you have Ace Bailey, VJ Edgecombe, Kasparis Yakushonis. Cass is just as talented as VJ Edgecombe and Ace Bailey, in my opinion. He has a great ball handle. He can dribble the ball. He's twitchy. He is able to get his shot off. You know, he's a fantastic playmaker as well for the Illinois team. 16 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, shooting well from the field, shooting about 35% from 3, which is something he does need to work on. He's not a consistent 3-point shooter, although he has been able to hit the shot pretty decently. That is something he needs to work on. Like Harper, he's also 6'6", 200 pounds. He does struggle finishing at the rim at times. He is able to get there pretty freely. Like I said, he has probably the best handle in the whole draft class. Better than Harper, better than Trey Johnson, better than a lot of the guards here. And he's a fantastic playmaker, probably the best playmaker in the draft. One thing about him, though, is his defense hasn't been good. He does struggle defensively, and he's not athletic. Or he is athletic, obviously. If you're an NBA talent, you're athletic, but he's not as athletic as you'd like him to be. You know, he doesn't get his shot off at the rim pretty often, but he is able to finish through traffic. He's a talented finisher. I think the Raptors could use him, you know, although you have Emmanuel Quickley or, you know, Grady Dick at the guard positions. Are they really like your future? I think having a guy like Cass, who is able to set up Brandon Ingram, RJ Barrett, Scotty Barnes, Pirtle, make their life a little bit easier, is a fantastic option for the Raptors. And I think it's a no-brainer because a lot of the remaining players have overlapping skill sets with some of your top players. And Cass gives you something different. A ball handler, you know, who can pass the rock, shoot the rock, rebound, and, you know, compete. I think this is a fantastic fit for the Raptors, but I can see them going other directions. But I really like Kasparis Yakushonis at 5 for the Toronto Raptors. Next team up is the Philadelphia 76ers. This could go a couple of different ways. So, depending on what the Sixers do, I'm obviously saying that they're going to compete if you have Embiid, Maxey, and Paul George on, you know, that large of a contract. I think an obvious fit for them, if they're looking to compete, is probably Liam McNeely here. I don't know if I really love it, though, because although Liam McNeely is NBA ready in some ways, he's a good shooter, good defender, he's not the best player available here. You have question marks on taking Trey Johnson here because, hey, defensively, Trey Johnson isn't really great. You know, pairing him alongside Tyrese Maxey in the backcourt and Jared McCain might raise some questions, you know, defensively, especially if you have to run Maxey alongside McCain or Maxey alongside Trey Johnson at some points. You know, they could get exploited defensively pretty heavily here, which is why it's such an interesting, you know, pick here for the Philadelphia 76ers. You could take Igor Demin here as well, but Igor Demin, like I said, is a lead ball handler. He does need to be. He's not a great shooter, and I think if you build around Embiid, you'd prefer to draft some shooters. So I would go with Liam McNeely here. He's been shooting well, playing well for UConn. He had a 38-point game the other day. You know, 43% from three or field doesn't tell the whole story. He's a great 3-point shooter. I think Liam McNeely is the pick here. Next up, we have Brooklyn Nets. If you're Brooklyn, you take best player available, which is pretty easily Trey Johnson in this situation. He's a great shooter. He could, you know, play off the ball, play with the ball. He plays for a struggling Texas team who doesn't have a lot of offensive talent. And I think Trey Johnson is a fantastic fit. You do question how he plays alongside Cam Thomas, but assuming Cam Thomas isn't in your long-term plans, I do think Trey Johnson is the pick here. Next up, we have the Chicago Bulls. Now, this is where it could get interesting, but I think they have one player that is really, really at the top of their, draft board, and I think that's Kaman Maluak for the Duke Blue Devils. He plays alongside Cooper Flagg. He is a great, great defender, great shot blocker, great rim runner. He has some upside in terms of shooting, but I don't really expect that to really come to fruition. But you're drafting a rim running center who could block shots, provide a defensive anchor when Vucevic is gone from the team, assuming he's gone from the team this season or this offseason. And I think Kaman Maluak fits really, really well with them. And he could, help you alleviate some stress down there. You don't want to take another guard here. You have 7 point guards on the roster. You really want to avoid that, doing that as much as possible. And instead try and draft a young project center who could help you alongside, rebuilding and getting better. Next team is the Portland Trailblazers. The Trailblazers could go a couple different ways, but if available and Asa Newell is still on the board, you take Asa Newell here. Asa Newell plays for the Bulldogs. He's putting up 15 points, 7 rebounds, an assist a game. He shoots well from the field. He has shown some shooting upside, although the shot hasn't been consistent. It looks great. He's 6'11" tall. He is athletic. He is a hyper athletic forward/center who can dunk the ball. He plays good defense. He's switchable, can guard the perimeter decently, good interior defender, good shot blocker. You're drafting a really young player with a ton of upside. Maybe he gets a 3-point shot and becomes a stretch 4. But if you're Portland, you're really looking to see what players can fit your timeline. They've been winning games as of late, which is, tough, but, you win. And I think being able to draft a power forward who could play alongside Scoot, Shaedon Sharpe, and Donovan Clingan is pretty important. Although that does raise some concerns with shooting, I think that's something you deal with later, and you take the best player here, which is Asa Newell, and he fits with your team as well. Next up, we have the San Antonio Spurs, who are picking via the Atlanta Hawks, I believe. And if you're the Spurs, I don't think you could look to draft a center like Derek Queen, but I think Derek Queen doesn't really fit with what they need. You could maybe try Igor Demin, but like I said, he's a lead ball handler, and with guys like Wemby, Stephon Castle, Devin Vassell, and De'Aaron Fox, you have too many guys who need the ball in their hands, which is why Ben Saraf is probably the pick here. He plays in Germany right now, out of Israel. He's a great shooter, can play defense. I think he's a pretty good pick here. He can play alongside Fox. He could play defense as well. And overall, you're drafting him really for his shooting and his overall ability to score the ball. Next up, we have the Miami Heat. Now, this is where I see Igor Demin going. This is pretty far down the board, especially, coming into the season. He was projected to go a little bit higher. But this season, he's had some weaknesses playing for BYU. He's not as good of a shooter as projected, although he did start off really hot. He's had games going 0 for 5, 0 for 5, 0 for 8, multiple games where he hasn't hit a 3, 2 for 8. He's had multiple games where he struggled with his shot and getting his shot off overall. He doesn't have a really, really tight handle. He's 6'9". He's really tall for a guard, so that's to be expected. But I think you can draft a player who can fit really well alongside the roster that you have in Miami. You could slot him in at the 1 or the 2, depending on what you want to do. Although defensively, he's not fantastic. You have guys like Bam, Khalil Ware, Andrew Wiggins, who can help cover some of his weaknesses. He's also a terrific playmaker, which is something I thought the Miami Heat missed a little bit. They don't really have a lead playmaker on their team. Tyler Hero is great, but he's not a fantastic playmaker. Bam is a good playmaker for his size, but being able to get a lead ball handler who could also pass the ball and hopefully shoot a little bit better at the NBA level at 11 is pretty good. I'm a little lower on Igor Demin than maybe some people are. I could see him going as high as 7 or 6, but I think just the way the draft is and the way it's been falling, I just think that no team is really going to look to draft a lead ball handler who's not really able to shoot the ball as much as or as high of a clip as you would like. So I think he probably falls a little bit in the draft. And I think Miami's a great fit for him. Next up, we have the Rockets. This is from Phoenix. And if you're the Rockets, you're looking for a knockdown shooter. You are looking for a knockdown shooter. I think the easy pick here is Concanopoulos. Once again, this is another player who could go way higher in the draft. Way higher in the draft. He could go 7. He could go 8. He could go a couple of different directions. Portland might take him instead of Austin. Well, there's a bunch of teams who might consider taking him here. But I have him up here. I have him down so low because defensively he's not as good as Liam McNeely. Him and Liam McNeely are pretty similar players in that they shoot well and are expected to defend. But he is not a good defender. His weaknesses are covered with Duke because, he plays alongside Cooper Flagg and Maluag, who are great defenders in their own right. But you're drafting a terrific three-point shooter, which is something the Rockets desperately need. He's able to knock down shots off the catch, with the ball, off screens. And you need somebody dynamic like that who could play alongside Amen Thompson, Jalen Green, Alperen Şengün, who all three haven't been terrific three-point shooters at all. They are players who struggle with their shots. And I think Concanopoulos can help you there. With the 13th pick, we have the Atlanta Hawks. Now, the Atlanta Hawks could go a bunch of different directions. If they decide to part ways with Trae Young, which is what I'm expecting here. This is me expecting Trae Young to be traded. I think a pretty good Trae Young replacement could be Jeremiah Fears, or it could be Nolan Traore from France. Jeremiah Fears playing for Oklahoma, he's been good. He has not been a good shooter though, which is, question marks. If you keep Trae Young, you take Colin Murray-Boyles, a forward who could fit in. Even though you have an overlord of forwards, maybe he could help alongside you. Derek Queen's also a terrific player, but he's somebody who is a post-dominant player. He's somebody who wants the ball in the post. So I'm not sure if you really want a center like that alongside Trae Young if you plan on keeping him. But under the assumption that Trae Young is leaving and you're looking to draft the best player available, I think Jeremiah Fears is the pick here. He has struggled from 3. He's a 25% three-point shooter, but he's athletic. He has a great handle. He's able to get to the rim easily. Good height at 6'4". This is assuming Trae Young leaves. So don't come at me for taking a point guard here. But if Trae Young leaves, I think Jeremiah Fears at 13 is a fantastic pick for the Hawks. Next up we have Miami, once again, who are picking from Golden State. I think they could go a bunch of different ways here, like a bunch of other teams. You might consider taking Ian Jackson here. Nolan Traore again could go here. Colin Murray-Boyles, Derek Queen, depending on what you need. And if you look at the Heat roster, they have a good amount of guard play. They have a decent center play with, Bam Adebayo, Khalil Ware, Jovic, and a bunch of other stuff. You'll also have good wings in Wiggins and Jaime Jaquez. So really, what do you need here if you're Miami? Which is the big question. You just drafted Yegor Demon earlier to help with your guards. So I think a good pick here is Colin Murray-Boyles from South Carolina. He is averaging 16 points, 2 assists, 9 rebounds, shooting great from the field. He's a decent three-point shooter. And he is a 2-year college player, so he should come in a bit more NBA ready than other players. And if you're looking to compete, that's probably what you want. He's a great defender. Probably the best defender in the class right now. Maybe, I don't know if he's better than Flagg. Could be. He's a great rebounder for his size at 6'7". And I think he slots in really well, whether you're running Bam at the center or Khalil Ware at the center. Obviously he's going to come off the bench. I don't expect him to start. But I think Colin Murray-Boyles is a great pick here if you're looking for a 3-and-D player who could also rebound the ball and play the 4 alongside either one of your bigs. Now, let's just take a look really quickly, recap the draft. So, Flagg at 1. Absolutely unanimous. I think pretty easily he goes number 1 every time. Dylan Harper as well at number 2. I think this is a pretty easy pick depending on what team is picking. If you're the Hornets, the only teams I don't see taking Dylan Harper at 2 are the Hornets. Just the Hornets, really. If you're every other team here, you take Dylan Harper. East Bailey at 3. could not be. You could see VJ Edgecombe going here. You could see Kaspers Yakushonis going here. But I think if you're the Jazz, you take Ace Bailey, who's the best player available in my opinion, for VJ Edgecombe. Oh my goodness, this is probably my favorite pick in this class. If the Hornets can't get Cooper Flag, can't get lucky enough to strike gold, VJ Edgecombe is a fantastic option. This is the best possible fit for a player in this draft class. 5, Kaspers Yakushonis. I think this is a great fit as well. Playmaking guard who could help settle alongside Brandon Ingram, Scotty Barnes, and RJ Barrett. Liam McNeely at 6. This might be a little high. He's probably not better than Trey Johnson or Asa Newell, but I think the Philadelphia 76ers are going to be drafting for players who could fit alongside them. Trey Johnson at 7. Like I said, he has overlapping skill sets with Cam Thomas, but this is a player I also like there. Kaman Maluwak. This is probably my second favorite fit in this class. He fits so well he'd fit so well or play so well for the Bulls, and he's a player that they probably want and need. Asa Newell to the Blazers. I'm liking this more and more the more I look at it. Fits alongside their guards and Donovan Clingan well. Ben Saraf to the Spurs. If they can't get Trey Johnson, Ben Saraf is a pretty good second option to get. Great shooter. Can play defense. I like it. Yegor Demon to the Heat. This might be considered low, but I really like this. Or, now that I think about it, if you're the Spurs, you might take Con Knupel over Ben Saraf if that's what you want. But I could see either of these being interchangeable here. Jeremiah Fears, assuming Trae Young is gone. Completely assuming Trae Young is gone. If, Trae Young stays, they might take Colin Murray Boyles instead, and Miami ends up with Jeremiah Fears, which I like as well. Get a real point guard to play alongside them. So overall, this is a really, really good draft class with a ton of options. You have a clear number 1. You have a ton of players depending on fit. They might get drafted as high as 2 or as low as 5. I don't see Dylan Harper falling anything below 3. But VJ Edgecombe, Cass, Ace Bailey, they're all really interchangeable here. And it's really, really nice to see this much young talent, especially out of college, coming to the NBA. And I really look forward, when the standings are official, I'll probably do another mock draft. So let's see what happens,